Welcome, dear students. Let us begin with our last session for history, lesson number 2, New Kings and Kingdoms. In the last session, we discussed about the different temples that were constructed during the Chola dynasty and about the important craft that was associated with this Chola empire, which was making of the bronze images or bronze sculptures. And I also discussed the technique of making these sculptures with you. Today, let us deal more about the agriculture and administration of the empire. So let us discuss about the agriculture and the irrigation system that was developed during the Cholas. As we all know that there were many different achievements by the Cholas and which was actually possible because of this agriculture and irrigation developments that were made by the different rulers of the Chola dynasty. So now we also know that the Chola Empire was situated around the Kaveri Delta. And yes, Kaveri River branches off into several small channels, which finally empties into the Bay of Bengal. These channels overflow frequently, depositing the soils on the banks. So the soil is very good for the rice cultivation. It provides good moisture and yes, water which is nearby. So this area was actually a boon for agriculture. Different kinds of agricultural practices were promoted and improved by the Chola rulers. Maybe earlier agriculture was practiced in the parts of Tamil Nadu, but only during this 5th or the 6th century, this particular area near the Kaveri Delta was opened for cultivation on a large scale. So there are some steps taken by the Cholas to improve and increase the agricultural activities as well as which would result in a good yield. So the first one was they cleared the forests which were around the Kaveri Delta. Then they had to level the land as well. Embankments were also built in the delta regions to prevent flooding. As I told you that the small channels frequently were overflown or they were having floods during the monsoons, and so embankments were very necessary to protect their crops. Then they also constructed certain canals to carry the water to the field. So this was a kind of irrigation system that they developed and devised. They also grew two crops in areas where it was possible, maybe depending upon the season. They also dug wells, which were also helpful to provide water to the fields. And finally, as we all know about the concept of rainwater harvesting these days, even during the medieval period, these Cholas thought about collection of this rainwater and maybe to preserve it for the or to conserve that water for the time when there is no rain or there is a water scarcity. So they constructed huge tanks for this purpose. So this is all about the agriculture and irrigation part of or done during the Chola periods. Now let us see one more important feature, which is about the sluice gate in Tamil Nadu. Here is a picture for you. So if you can just see the sluice gate, it actually works like a door kind of a thing. So what is a sluice gate actually? It is a sliding gate or a device for controlling the flow of water. Maybe these kinds of structures were being made or constructed nearby the water bodies so that the water does not flow with a lot of speed and it could be controlled, because if the water flows with a great speed and the agricultural yield is destroyed, there would be a problem and scarcity of food in the empire as well as in the areas around it. So this was one of the important feature. Now let us move and discuss about the administration of the empire. So earlier we have discussed about the administration of the kingdoms which were emerging during the medieval period. But now specifically we are going to discuss about the administration of the Chola Empire. So as we know that agricultural activities were actually flourishing in this area, maybe because of the spread of irrigation, certain settlements of peasants started settling in these particular areas. So many groups of peasants developed, the settlements developed, and these different settlements of peasants was known as Ur. Okay, so you need to remember that as the agricultural activities were flourishing with the help of irrigation, many peasants started residing nearby this delta region, and so certain settlements also developed. They were settling there for a long period of time, and these settlements were known as Ur. Next we have Nadu, which can be called as large unit of groups of villages of peasants. Now this was a small settlement of peasant known as Ur, and we can say many Ur together made up a village, and that was known as a Nadu. Now village council and this Nadu or the group of peasants played a very important role in certain administrative functions. So what were these administrative functions which were carried on by the village council or the Nadu? Was dispensing the justice and collection of the taxes. These were the important functions. Now there were also certain rich peasants or the landowners from a Velela caste. So this caste specifically we had rich peasants coming up, and they had a control over the affairs of the Nadu. So they were given the in charge or the charge for controlling certain things of that particular village or the Nadu, and it was done under the supervision of the Chola government. Then these Chola kings also gave titles like Muvendavelan or Arayar to rich landowners as a mark of respect and entrusted them with important positions and offices. Now, maybe when we have these rich peasants from the Velela caste, these kings gave them the titles as Muvendavelan or Arayar. Muvendavelan or Arayar is like a chief or a peasant serving many different kings. And why these titles were given? It was a mark of respect, and they also got a important position in the kingdom. Now let us discuss about what were the different types of lands. As we discussed earlier that these kings used to give land grants to the Brahmins, so they also provided different types of land grants to different people. So let us just see in short what were these different types. First we have Velan Vagai, that is land for non-Brahmin peasants. Then we have Brahmadaya, this is the land gifted to the Brahmins. Shalabhoga, land for maintenance of school. Maybe this land was donated or gifted to someone to take care of the education of the children in the village, or maybe construction of the school. Then we have Devadana, that means the land gifted to the temples. Certain rulers gifted the land for the construction of temples, where yes, we know people from everywhere used to come for worshipping, and slowly these temples started becoming a social, economic and cultural hub. And finally we have Pallichandam, which is the land donated to the Jain institutions. So these are the different types of land. I want you to mark this in your textbook on page number 26. So let's move. Now as we know that large number of Brahmins started settling in the Kaveri Valley as also in other parts of South India. When they started getting this land as a gift or as a donation, they also started settling down around it. This Brahmadeya, that was the land which was looked after by an assembly or a sabha of prominent Brahmin landholders. They all worked together very efficiently, and whenever they had certain meetings, the decisions were recorded in inscriptions on the walls of the temples. So now, yes, when they have a land, they also may be having some agricultural practices, maybe certain religious rituals performed in a part of that land. So all these, whatever decisions were being taken during the meetings, they were recorded on the walls of the temples. Then we also have certain associations of traders who participated in the administrative functions of the towns as well. So those were known as nagarams. So what is nagarams? Nagaram is an association of traders. Now there is an inscription which was found in Uttara Merur in Chingleput district of Tamil Nadu, which gives us the details about the Sabha. And what are the details? It is like Sabha had separate committees to look after different tasks of the villages. Now, even we have different people working for different sections of our society, maybe taking care of different areas like health, finance, and so on. So, similarly, in those days, there were separate committees for different tasks of the villages. And then there were also elections conducted for the election of members of that Sabha. And what was the procedure? So it was like the names of those members who were eligible for the committee were written on the palm leaf. Then these palm leaves were put up in an earthenware pot, and a young boy was asked to take out one by one for each committee. So this was the procedure. It was like an lucky draw system which was followed for the elections. And nowadays we know we have all kind of machinery which help us in our election procedure. This is one of that inscriptions from Uttara Merur which was found. So you can see certain things inscribed on the walls. Yes. Now we just see what are the qualifications necessary for becoming a member of a Sabha. This is also being found on the inscription from Uttara Merur. So the qualifications are as follows. Those who wish to become members of the Sabha should be owners of lands from which land revenue was collected. So that means they should be land owners and they should be collecting the land revenue. Then they also should have their own homes. Obviously, when they have their own land, they will be having their own homes, but this was also an important criteria. Their age should be between 35 to 70 years. They should possess good knowledge of Vedas. So anyone gets up and wants to be a member of Sabha was not allowed. Knowledge of Vedas was a must. They should also be well versed in the administrative matters and should be very honest. If anyone has been a member for any of the committees in past 3 years, he cannot become a member of any committee. So 3 years, if you are a member, you cannot participate again. Anyone who has not submitted his accounts and those of his relatives also cannot contest the elections. Even we know that these days when people contest for elections, they need to actually declare their property and whether their accounts are cleared, everything they need to declare. So similarly here, if your accounts were not clear, your financial status was not properly disclosed to the people, you were not eligible to contest for the election. That is all from my side, dear students. If you have any queries, any questions, do note it down and feel free to ask me during our next session when we meet. Thank you till then. Take care of yourselves and yes, stay safe.